So I'm Jan. I'm heading up growth at Imagely, joining from the lovely Ruhr Valley in Germany, and I'll be keeping an eye on the chat. And if any kind of technical questions come up, I hope I'll be able to field them. Claudia.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Claudia. I'm just here for moral support. I'm also part of marketing team here at Imagely. And yes, happy to see some returning people and welcome all the new ones. And I hope this will be informative and answer your questions. So please don't be shy using the chat. You can put in questions anytime and we will make our best to answer them. And back to Harry.
Great, thank you both. It looks like we've already got a question in there. So yeah, maybe just a good bit of background question from Sammy asking whether this is going to be focused on the web SDK or the mobile SDKs. This webinar is predominantly focused on the web SDK, but a lot of the concepts that we'll be talking about today do also extend to the mobile SDKs. So while the extension points that we're going to talk about within the UIs are not exactly the same across both platforms, and maybe the range of existing plugins that we have for web doesn't always extend to mobile, the concepts are the same. Yeah, we'll probably do another webinar in this series, starting to focus more on mobile UI customization and extension of mobile UIs. All of the examples that we'll go through today will be web focused though. Okay. Well, if there's no more initial questions, let's jump into this. So hopefully you're all here expecting a webinar on customizing and extending the SDK. If you're not, you're welcome to stick around, but let us know if you were expecting something else. A little bit of housekeeping. We expect that this will only take about 30 minutes. Please feel free, as Claudia mentioned, to put any questions that you want, either within the chat or directly within the question and answer section of the webinar that you will find towards the right of your screen. You can probably see that this webinar is also being recorded, and we will of course share with you all afterwards, not just the recording of this, but also an email sharing links to the various demos, and possibly even the slide deck, Jan. Yeah, so we'll also share the slide deck with everyone afterwards. Okay, so what are we going to go through? We'll give a little bit of background to Imagely. Those of you that are returning visitors to our webinars will probably already be quite familiar with that, so we won't spend too much time on those. We're going to go through some of the core extension points within our SDK. We're then going to jump into some real-life examples of where those extension points live within the SDK and show some plugins as well. And of course, we try and leave as much time as we can for questions and answers at the end. But as I say, if you have questions as we're going through, please feel free to ask. Okay, so maybe a little bit of background. Who are we? What do we do? Hopefully, there's some people that are relatively familiar with Imagely at this point, but for those of you that aren't, Imagely is a company that makes creative tools for any use case. So whether that's photo editing, video editing, design, or creative automation, that's what we do. We're a completely remote company. We have employees spread pretty much all around the world at this point, although lots of them are based within Europe. So a little bit more about us. When it comes to creating SDKs, Imagely took a little bit of a different approach. They decided that we would build SDKs from the ground up, so a very foundational approach to graphics processing, and decided to build our own technology rather than leveraging operating system level or any high level platform APIs. We're fortunate enough that we've now got lots of customers using our SDKs. You can see some of those on the screens now, and combined they're powering over 500 million photo, video creative automations on a monthly basis. Yeah, that's enough about the background. Let's jump into what we're looking at today. So this next slide probably gives a little bit of a mental model to help us understand at what layer customizations can take effect within our SDK. So you can see from the image on the screen that the SDK is really split into these two distinct layers. The first layer that you can see at the bottom is the engine layer. So as we said, we decided to kind of build all of the processing capability from the ground up, and we built a processing engine in C++, and that creative engine then powers all of the core editing operations. So it handles image processing, image, photo, text, audio, vector manipulation, whatever it may be. This intentional separation gives you some advantages that we're going to talk about in a little bit more detail today. But one major bit is that there's cross-platform consistency. We use this same engine component and then cross-compile that directly to different platforms. So to kind of address the question that Sammy asked earlier, everything that we're talking about today is going to be directed to the web, but it all applies to mobile platforms as well, because it's the same engine that underpins all of the functionality of the editor. So now that we have this understanding about the engine component, you can see that we then have this thin UI layer that sits on top, and that UI layer can be customized for whatever use case you really want to leverage it for. We have some UIs that are built that you can leverage, and we're going to take a look at those in just a second. But it also means that you don't necessarily need to leverage UIs that we have built ourselves and then customize those for your requirements. You could even go down the route of building your own UI and just leveraging the underlying engine component if you wanted to. And the final advantage to this kind of split between UI and the engine is that you can leverage the engine by itself for creative automation. So for headless functionality, you don't need to do everything through a UI layer, and it opens up a whole world of headless automation. Okay, so let's jump into this in a bit more detail. On the screen now, you're going to see a little bit of a blueprint, I suppose, of our default UIs. I recognize it might not be the easiest to see all of the details here on the screen. Don't worry, we are going to go into them in a bit more detail in a second. But I just wanted to kind of highlight within the UIs that we offer where these extension or customization points exist. So there's kind of four key areas, I suppose, that that exist. On the far left-hand side of the image, as you can see, it is the dock. You have the ability to add or remove buttons from that dock. You can create your own custom buttons there. If you then look over towards the right of the screen on the canvas, you can see that both at the very top and very bottom of the canvas, we've highlighted the ability for you to be able to add in custom action buttons either to the on-canvas menu or to the page toolbar at the bottom of the screen. So that's kind of the second area of extensibility. Just above that, you'll see what we refer to as the inspector bar. This is where you might all be familiar with more granular controls dependent on whatever item is being selected on the canvas. For example, if you're selecting a text box, you're going to see text-specific tools. If you're selecting an image, you're going to see image-specific tools. We offer the ability for you to customize that inspector bar and add in your own custom buttons with custom actions behind them there. The final area is the navigation bar that then sits above that. You can customize the buttons there and add in custom actions as well. And then the final bit, any of these buttons can trigger the opening of a panel. The panel you can see just inset from the left of the screen. And that really opens up a bit more real estate for you to be able to start doing some quite interesting or complex custom functionality, either leveraging workflows that already exist within the SDK or connecting to third-party tools or services as well. Okay, so we're going to jump into the editor now, but let me just pause there for a quick second and see whether there's any initial questions before we look at this in a bit more detail. All right. If they come up, definitely happy to answer. So what we're going to, a question from Peter, is the panel, oh, lots of questions coming through. Let me skip back then. Some of these may be answered as we go through, but let's try and address them now. Is the panel on the side resizable? In terms of width, do you mean, Peter? Yes, to some extent, yes. As you can go through and add in your own custom logic into these panels, there is some leniency with which that can be resized, but I believe there is some sort of limit to that. Let me try and find out and get back to you on specifics by the end of the webinar. Let's see. We utilize this in image bank. Will end customers be able to use these customization functions? Or do these changes have to be done on the back end? These customization functions are really done by you as the owner of the product while you're setting it up. You can of course make any of these buttons available to your end users, but the creation of these buttons, the determining what logic exists behind those buttons, would all be done on the back end rather than by your customers. Can you initiate a pop-up in the panel? Jack, could you maybe just elaborate a little bit on what you mean there? And in the meantime, I'll have a look at Felipe's question. Any idea when the animation timelines will be customizable as well? I'm not entirely sure on further animation timeline customization at the moment. I know some changes are happening to the timeline in general, but not sure whether that's been extended for animations at the moment. I'll definitely make a note of this, and we can follow up with you afterwards, Felipe, or address this in the email that gets sent out afterwards. Jack, feel free to just kind of clarify on what you mean by initiating a pop-up within the panel. What I'll do is jump into these examples anyway, and hopefully you'll be able to see it there. Okay. If a client has multiple brand managers that need to be able to customize it, can you provide access to that customization? So you're saying that you want a different user interface for each of the different brand managers that you have, i.e. brand manager A would be able to see a certain set of tools and brand manager B would be able to see a different set of tools with different brand components or assets. Okay. In the meantime, again, Osteen, I'll just move on to Rodrigo's question while I'm waiting to hear your response on that. So sorry, yeah, I mean, a lot of this customization is done at a developer level. We do have a customization panel that I can show you in one of our demos that feasibly you could make available to your your end users, but it isn't really recommended from us. This is probably something that needs to be done at a developer level. Rodrigo got some questions here. Using AI, what's the best way to generate customized images from a PSD template? I think that may be straying a little bit away from the topic of today's webinar. So in the interest of time, Rodrigo, I'm just going to jump into what we've got planned for the rest of today's session. But if you want to hang around at the end, then we can definitely have a chat about that. I think the same for you as well. All right, amazing. So we're going to go through some basic UI configurations and the theming that can be done. We're going to have a look at some more advanced UI customization, and then we'll jump into the plugins as well, which, judging by some of the questions, is probably the bit that everyone wants to have a bit more of an understanding about. So let's make the most of the time and jump straight into those now. All right. Bring this in. Hopefully everyone can see this. Apologies. There we go. Hopefully everyone can see this. So everything that we're going to go through now, for those of you that aren't familiar with where to find these showcases, everything here sits under products. Everything we're talking about today is the CreativeEditor SDK, and everything that we're about to go through can be found under Explore All Demos. Explore All Demos will open up this page, and this page can give you not just an overview of the kind of out of the box or off the shelf UI configurations that we have for different use cases, but can also give you a deep dive into various features and functionalities of the SDK, some of the plugins that are already available. And Claudia has shared a link for you all to take a look at afterwards as well. So I appreciate that. Okay. So yeah, let's assume here that as a user, you don't want to go down the route of generating your own completely custom UI from scratch that's going to just leverage the engine component of our SDK. The main way that you would then get started is to come to this page, take a look at these kind of 5 or 6 different configurations of the editor that exist, and use these as a starting point for further customization. Everything is pretty much based around the same concepts that most people will be familiar with. You've kind of already seen a little blueprint of this already, but the general layout with a dock along the left-hand side, a canvas in the center, on-canvas menus both at the top and the bottom, inspector bars and kind of header bars available as well, and then panels that open up from the left-hand side. The different UI configurations that we offer are effectively different customizations of this. So for example, right now we're looking at the design editor. It has all of the kind of general features and functionalities that you would expect to see within a design editor. But if you had a more straightforward use case, like for example, photo editing, you can see that by simply reconfiguring some of the buttons that are available, you can really simplify the look and feel of the UI, pull in the tools that your end users are going to want to use more frequently directly into this dock, and make sure that they have access to them in a much more simplified way, rather than perhaps the more granular control that you might want to offer in different use cases. Within this example of a photo editor, we've also already stumbled across the first example of plugins as well, and where plugins can be leveraged. So down at the bottom of the screen here, you'll probably see this apps button within the dock. That opens up a custom panel, and within that custom panel, you can access custom functionality, which in this case is leveraging our background removal tool. All right. Now let's jump into a slightly different example here. This is our apparel editor. Again, you can see that for the most part, this is just a simplified customization of our default UI, whereby we've surfaced the main controls that people would want to have access to for designing a t-shirt. So having access to images, having access to text, shapes, and stickers. And while we're all here, one other bit to mention is that, of course, all of these asset classes, whether it be images, shapes, stickers, text, can all be customized as well, either with custom fonts or with your own collection of stickers, shapes, and images, either from your own backend or from third-party sources as well. I wanted to include this apparel editor in here to speak a little bit about customization or extension of the UI that can actually happen outside of our editor itself. You can see that the border of our editor ends somewhere around here. So everything that you're seeing on the right-hand side is a form that we have created on our website. So you could build something exactly like this as simply as you could build any kind of form on your website. But the really fun bit starts happening when this form can leverage the engine APIs that we make available to start changing things directly on the canvas. So it may be changing the orientation of an item on the screen. For example, if we switch to the back and I zoom out a little bit, you can see that we've now got a view of the back of the t-shirt, and the designable or printable area of that t-shirt has also changed. It may be that you might want to change the color of whatever the component on the screen may be. But it doesn't just limit to this. You could go completely down the route of complete form-based editing if you wanted to as well. So it's not just customization within the UI that's possible. You can also implement some really cool stuff on your own website that has an impact on the editor itself. We've already touched a little bit on plugins. So maybe just to kind of expand on that a little bit. Previously, you saw the background removal exist in a custom apps section down at the bottom. Another example of where you could implement these plugins, though, is on the on-canvas menu. As I select any of these images, an on-canvas menu appears, and we've created a custom button where background removal is surfaced. So again, you could really implement anything here. It doesn't have to be plugins that we have already created, such as background removal or any of the AI plugins that we're going to look into. If you have a specific feature or functionality that's niche to your business or something specific to your use case, it can be implemented in one of these extension points. Okay, I'm now going to jump into our AI editor. Just to clarify, our AI editor isn't some completely new AI-powered version of the editor that we've created. It is effectively still a customization of the same UI, but really leveraging all of those extension points to bring AI-based workflows directly into the editor. So you can already see that on the left-hand side here in the dock, we've created a custom button titled AI. When we click on that, it opens up a custom panel, but it's not just one layer of custom panel that can be created. So when we click on generate an image, you can see that another panel is then triggered to open, where you can start including things like switches, drop-down menus, prompt boxes, prompts to open up further custom panels. So this is slightly off the screen at the moment. And all of those can then have a direct impact of what's being generated onto the canvas. I won't go through actually generating images and things now. I'm sure you're all familiar enough with Gen AI at this point. But then that kind of moves us on to the second place where the UI can be extended. So you already saw that we've created with a plugin the remove background feature. That can then be extended to something like an AI button or a magic button that triggers a drop down. Again, that drop down could trigger another drop down or various other tools and workflows that you want. It could trigger the opening of text boxes. really the possibilities are quite endless when it comes to this. Let's just see. Yeah, it's just a text box. That's fine. Okay. And then the final area to talk about as well is up here, right along the top of the screen, where custom buttons can also live. Okay, I'm sure there's going to be some questions around plugins, so let me just pause there and give people an opportunity to ask some questions again. Okay, if there's no questions just now, then I will jump over to theming. This is a much more kind of simplified version of being able to customize the editor. Apologies, I kind of skipped over this earlier. But of course, you may just find that some of the UIs that Imagely have already provided already meet your needs. And really, you just want to start customizing them to meet your own brand requirements. So there's some things that we ship directly out of the box, like a light mode or a dark mode, but you also have the ability to then change background colors into whatever you would like. You could pick these to be completely custom and align with your own branding requirements. You can select active buttons. This might be a little bit tougher to see, but let's add an image onto a canvas, and then while the image is selected, add something like an effect. This is, if I switch the color around here, you might see little changes here and changes around the outside of whatever's been selected, just to kind of highlight the active color. And then accent colors as well can be used to change things like the export buttons or what's being selected at the time. So this is a bit more simple, more theming based, but can really help you meet the branding requirements so that this fits seamlessly into your products. And it's also worth mentioning that there's great localization capabilities as well. We give the ability for you to localize the editor into any language that you like. And if you're not happy about any of the logos or elements, the font that is being used within the editor, that's all customizable as well. Okay, it looks like a couple of questions have started coming in. Is it possible to let an AI add or change the blocks? Yes, it is. So let me just stop sharing my screen for just a second. If we sort of flick back to the idea here about the general architecture of the SDK, in the same way that a human or someone interacting through the UI would be able to go in and press a button to add or to remove a block, to change its size, its fill, color, whatever it may be. What's really happening is that the UI is using this API layer to tell the engine what to change on the canvas. But because you don't need this UI layer, you could start connecting something like an LLM directly with the engine component and using that to make changes to a scene file or what would be viewed on the canvas. So it's definitely already possible. We're in the process of currently extending our documentation to make it more LLM friendly, but you'll see that there is also there's already an LLM readable version of our documentation available on our docs tab that we can also share within the chat. And really, you're just leveraging this engine component to make automations, but whether that automation is done by a developer sitting and doing it or something more AI driven, it doesn't really make any difference to the engine. Hopefully that addressed your question, Peter, but let me know if there's any follow-ups there. It looks like we have another question from Logan. Is there a way to customize that AI panel, or is it strictly controlled by the AI plugins? No. So maybe a little bit of background about these AI plugins. They really are just our developers internally leveraging the plugin system to create things that are quite frequently requested or that we think would be useful tools for the majority of the end users of our of the SDK. It doesn't restrict you to using those. You can use them effectively as a blueprint, and then add more custom actions, connect with your own models, your own functionality. This is really just a blueprint that you can leverage. And if I just go back to sharing my screen for a second. Below any of these demos that we're going through, you will always see a link directly to the documentation telling you how and why this was built, and also the code. So in this case, you could just jump in and leverage the code in reference to these plugins to start adding in whatever kind of functionality you would like. Yeah, it also varies a little bit. I can jump over into the video version and show you that looks a little bit different. Probably won't have time to render a video right now, but you can see that it's a bit more extensive when it comes to video because people may want to be generating sound or using voice. If they do that, you can have things like speed control, select from various people. So hopefully we've created enough blueprints to give you a really great starting point of whatever custom plugin you would want to make. But there really aren't that much in the way of limitations of what you can do through the plugin system at the moment. Okay. Any other questions coming through or anything that I may have missed, Claudia? I think.
No, I think we're up to speed, but if we have time, we can go back to Rodrigo's question, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just make my way back to Rodrigo's question. Bear with me for one moment. Can I recognize the font name of a text element within a Photoshop film? Possibly. I actually don't know the answer to that, Rodrigo. I might have to come back to you on that. I'm using AI. What's the best way to generate customized images from a PSD template? So we offer a PSD file importer. So I would probably say the best way would be first to take whatever you have in that PSD template format, import it into the Imagely scene file format, and then you can start doing leveraging that engine component to automate changes to that, either whether it's by yourself through the UI or using AI. So simple things like changing colors, positions, fonts would all be possible. But first you need to convert the PSD template that you have into the scene file format that the Imagely ecosystem uses. And then once within that system, you can start either using the engine component or making customizations through the UI. Hopefully that answered the question, but definitely happy to spend a bit more time digging into that if that would be helpful. It looks, yes, okay, I'm just trying to figure out a custom action. Another generate option. Yeah, Logan, as far as I'm aware, that would definitely be possible. As you can see, there's no kind of limit to the number of these custom panels opening above each other or stacking. So if you wanted one custom action to trigger the opening of a custom panel that then may have a generate option within there, that would definitely be feasible. My suggestion would be that we'll follow up with you after this anyway, and we can definitely try and provide some solutions engineering support just to make sure that you've got exactly what you need to be able to build that. But yeah, definitely sounds like an interesting use case. Okay. I'm definitely happy to hang around here for the next 5 or 10 minutes and field any other questions that people have. But otherwise, thank you all very much for joining. I recognize this was a bit of a whistle-stop tour of all of the extension and customization capabilities that are available within Imagely. It's probably a bit too much to truly fit into one webinar. But hopefully now that you're aware of the various points and the various customization that's happening, any more detailed questions that you have, we're definitely happy to help with. So like I say, I'll continue to answer some questions, but for those of you that need to shoot off, thank you very much for joining. And yeah, I hope this was helpful for everyone. Okay. In the last webinar, Peter asked about a primitive table component. Okay. I haven't got any updates on the moment about table creating capabilities coming into the editor. That probably means it's not on our immediate roadmap, which means it's probably not going to be available within the coming few weeks. It's definitely something that is on our long-term roadmap, but whether that's been immediately scheduled, I'm not entirely sure. I wouldn't expect that it's going to be available in the next few weeks, but again, we can certainly try and find out when some of those capabilities may be available. It has certainly been requested by a few of our customers, and it is definitely something that we would like to include in the product at some point, though. All right. Any other questions from those people that are still with us? All right. If not, then we will end the webinar now. As I say, we'll send email follow-ups around this. But if you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to me, Claudia, or Jan directly, and we'll be more than happy to help. And yeah, I wish you a happy rest of the day, and thanks for joining.